My name is Jessica. I'm a 36-year-old who works from home. My husband, Michael, and I got married 3 years ago. At that time, we were both 33 and eager to have children, so we considered fertility treatments and visited a hospital. The test results showed no problems, which was a relief, but despite our hopes, we were unable to conceive a child. As we began to consider giving up, Michael said something unexpected. But my mom insists that we must have an heir. Feeling puzzled, I sighed at my husband's words. Michael is generally a good husband, but he has a bit of a mama's boy streak, always adhering strictly to whatever his mother says. I find my mother-in-law quite difficult to deal with. Michael, being the eldest son with a younger sister, is doted upon excessively by his mother, who is very much into the eldest son adoration. His sister didn't seem to like this and left home early. Michael's job involves frequent transfers, but when we got married, he was working near his parents' home. I was told there might be transfers in the future when we married, but I thought I'd be happy anywhere as long as I was with him. However, after renting a house near his parents, his mother started visiting often, especially on Michael's days off. She would drop by unannounced even when I was working from home, disrupting my work, criticizing how I fold laundry or clean the house. Frankly, it was quite a nuisance. And every time we met, she'd ask about grandchildren. Of course, you'll have a boy. We don't need a girl. Her presence was nothing but stress for me. I tried talking to Michael about it, hoping he would understand, but no matter how often I brought it up, he remained optimistic, saying, "My mom just wants to be friends with you, Jessica. How can someone who causes stress want to be friends? I'm a contemplative person, and Michael is an optimist." I was attracted to the qualities he had that I lacked, and we balanced each other well. But this gap between us remained unbridged. However, 6 months ago, Michael's transfer was finalized, and we could finally move away from his parents' home. Our new location is closer to my parents' home. It's mostly farmland around my parents' place, but Michael's new workplace is in a relatively bustling area with train access. A sort of regional city. Yet, it's less than an hour's drive to my parents' home. Moving relieved most of my stress, and I found my work and life to be much more comfortable. Then, just recently, I discovered I was pregnant. Michael and I hugged and celebrated together. Although I'm anxious about having a baby at an older age, it's a long-awaited pregnancy. When we reported the news to his parents, his mother's first reaction was, "It's a boy, right?" Even when Michael said we didn't know the gender yet, she insisted, "It has to be a boy." However, we later found out we were having a girl. When my mother-in-law learned this, she called me while Michael was away and said, "You're utterly useless. What did you even marry into this family for?" Perhaps due to hormonal changes or emotional instability, I ended up crying alone. When Michael came home and I told him what happened, he yelled, "Are you saying it's my mother's fault?" And I cried even more. Nevertheless, he cared for my well-being and helped with the housework. He's a good husband, if only his mother weren't involved. So, I managed to give birth safely. I returned home a few days after giving birth. Michael came to pick me up from the hospital, and we drove back to our house. To my surprise, my mother-in-law was there. I didn't expect her to come to see her granddaughter, yet there she was. I had a bad feeling, but Michael naively said, "Mom came to help out." While Michael was in another room with our daughter, my mother-in-law brought out a cake from the fridge. A celebration for the birth. "You couldn't have eaten anything good in the hospital, could you?" And she continued. "This cake cost $350. She said, handing me the cake box. $350? I had never heard of such an expensive cake and couldn't help but exclaim aloud. My mother-in-law nodded and urged me to open it. I wondered what a $350 cake would look like. With excitement, I placed it on the table and opened the box. However, I was concerned by the smirk on my mother-in-law's face. When I opened the box, I found a cake that didn't seem worth $350 at all. The whipped cream was dry, and although there was fruit on top, it clearly looked like canned mandarins. I wondered which bakery would sell such a shoddy cake for $350. I love sweets and usually enjoy any cake regardless of the price. Yet, this was the first time I felt so disappointed upon opening a cake box. But there was more to my mother-in-law's cake. I couldn't believe my eyes. As I raised my gaze from the cake, there she was, smirking. "How is it?" "The $350 cake?" she asked. Her words made my blood boil, and I threw the entire cake, box and all, into the trash can. "What are you doing? Please leave." As I raised my voice, Michael, surprised, came into the living room. Before I could explain, my mother-in-law burst into tears to Michael. "Jessica was so mean," she cried, pointing to the trash can. Seeing this, Michael became furious. "What have you done? Mom went through all the trouble to make that." Before I could explain the absurdity of the $350 cake, my mother-in-law spoke. "That's right. I made it myself for you, so it's worth $350. Now I understood. It made sense that no cake like that could be worth $350. Even for $35, let alone $350, I wouldn't buy it." That solved the mystery. No bakery would allow such a disrespectful presentation. As I was coming to terms with this, Michael said, "Jessica, apologize to my mom." He was, as always, unconditionally on his mother's side. While I stood there dumbfounded, I heard our daughter's voice from the other room. I rushed to her. I heard some commotion outside the door, but my daughter was more important at the moment. After she calmed down and fell asleep, I returned to the living room and found a note from Michael saying he had gone out to eat and that I should reflect on my actions. I was stunned. Could I continue living here with my husband? Should I really resort to running back to my parents? I had no other choice. With these thoughts, I curiously checked the trash can where I had thrown the cake. It was untouched, just as I had left it. I decided to take a photo of it. Then I called my parents and explained everything. My father immediately offered to come pick us up. I felt sorry for my newborn daughter, having to move again. But it would be better for both of us staying here. Michael, who was supposed to have gone out to eat, didn't return for a while, but my father arrived first. As my father was loading our things into his car, Michael and my mother-in-law finally returned. They were surprised to see my father, but Michael started to get angry when he saw him moving our luggage. "Where are you going? Running back to your parents? Can't handle things on your own at your age?" His words were harsher than usual. It seemed he had been drinking, his face was red and I could smell alcohol on him. Furious at his state, I exploded. "How could you go out drinking, leaving your wife and newborn daughter alone? Right now, I just can't stand being in the same space as you." So I decided to seek refuge at my parents' house. Then, my mother-in-law, who also reeked of alcohol, chimed in. "Oh, scary. Good riddance to such a terrible wife." Her every word was infuriating. "Yes, exactly. I'll take our daughter and go, just as you wish. Please enjoy your time alone with Michael." Michael looked puzzled, but I ignored him and got into my father's car. My father remained silent, controlling his emotions. The next day, Michael contacted me. "Where are you? I was shocked to wake up and find you gone." That's right. I had forgotten, but Michael tends to lose his memory when he drinks, which he doesn't do often. I sighed. "Don't you remember? Yesterday, you left your hungry wife and daughter to dine out with your mother, and even drank alcohol. After what happened and what was said, I couldn't stay there." Michael sounded surprised and flustered, but hearing my mother-in-law's voice in the background reignited my anger. "So, your mom stayed over, huh? I won't return to a house where such an unreasonable person has stayed." "What do you mean?" Michael's voice grew stern. "To you, she's your mother, but to me, she's a stranger. I'm tired and stressed postpartum, I don't have the capacity to cater to others. Whose fault do you think it is that we struggled to have a child? Her frequent visits and the stress they caused prevented my pregnancy. Otherwise, why would I get pregnant so soon after moving away from her?" I felt relieved not seeing her face. But then I return home with our daughter to find her there. I just can't. Despite knowing how rude I was being, my pent-up resentments made it impossible to stop. Then Michael yelled over the phone. "You're the worst. Come back immediately and apologize to my mom." His words left me stunned. The next thing I said was, "What?" in disbelief. I continued. "I took our daughter here as your mother wished." I spoke coldly, and Michael sounded confused. "What do you mean? Your mother doesn't want a granddaughter. She's always been saying we should have a son." I wasn't sure how serious she was. But that cake confirmed it. "Cake? What about it? Didn't you see the plate?" "What? The plate on the cake? Or did you not even see the cake?" I had hit the nail on the head. The trash can where I threw away the cake hadn't had anything else in it. It was likely still in the same state. So, I instructed Michael to check the kitchen trash can. There's nothing in it. Had she destroyed the evidence in the night? Then ask your mother what was written on the cake's plate, and where she threw it away. I could hear their conversation over the phone. She claimed to know nothing about any plate, calling it a delusion. She stubbornly refused to say where she disposed of it. I wondered how Michael would react. She's saying she doesn't know about any plate. Even Michael seemed somewhat disheartened. Of course, she would say that. If you had seen it, it would have been a disaster. No matter the trouble, she'd dispose of it before you saw it. To erase the evidence. His voice became somber. In the background, I heard my mother-in-law's voice behind my confused husband. "Why don't you just tell her to come back and entertain me? She's really a useless daughter-in-law." Those words seemed to finally make Michael stop his mother. "I'm going to hang up now and send you a text. Maybe you should show it to your mother as well. Once you've talked it over, contact me again." After hanging up, I sent Michael all the photos of the cake and the plate. Within 30 minutes, Michael called back, saying he was on his way to me. I stopped him. "Stay there. Your father will be arriving soon." I hung up after saying just that. In fact, my father was so upset with Michael's behavior yesterday that he contacted my in-laws. He had reported everything to them. My father-in-law, unaware of the situation, apologized profusely and said he would talk to Michael. In the evening, Michael and his parents arrived at my parents' house. Upon arrival, Michael immediately apologized to me. I had no idea about all of this, not just now but even before. "I had no clue Mom was treating you like this, Jessica." Seeing his seemingly repentant demeanor, I realized I had become indifferent. "Do you think I didn't know is enough? I talked to you about these issues when we lived in the previous house. But you did nothing. Saying Mom just wants to be friends with you." Michael turned pale at my words. "What about? Always following your mother's words. Choosing her over your wife. I guess I'm not needed, am I?" Michael clung to me with a pale face. "It's not like that, I'm really sorry, I didn't mean." "Then what did you mean?" He fell silent, looking down. "Apparently, you'll always choose your mother over your wife and daughter. A mama's boy and a mother who adores her eldest son. I should have realized sooner. Now I understand why your sister left home early." Michael tried to argue back as I sighed. "I'm not a mama's boy. I care about you too. Then can you cut ties with your mother forever?" He fell silent. I sighed, and my mother-in-law, who was brought by my father-in-law against her will, spoke up. "How can you say that? Michael and I are mother and son. We can't just cut ties." My father-in-law tried to calm her down, but she continued. "I never liked you in the first place. Michael should have married someone younger." "Really? Then I'll cut ties right now. I have the divorce papers ready. If we divorce, you and I will be strangers." Saying this, I saw Michael's face turn pale. "I want to cut ties immediately with someone who would make a cake and write such things on the plate. I showed everyone the photo of the plate with 'Take your daughter' and leave written on it." My father-in-law, who apparently hadn't been told the details, turned pale and scolded my mother-in-law. "Did you do the same thing to your own daughter that you did to your daughter-in-law?" I was shocked to hear that. It turned out my mother-in-law had once written, "We don't need a daughter" on her own daughter's birthday cake plate, leading to their estrangement. How much she must dislike women. She probably thought that by excluding women close to her, she would receive more attention. Michael had indeed become what she wanted. As I handed Michael the divorce papers, he started making excuses. We just had a child, we shouldn't divorce. Mom was just jealous of you this time, please understand. Did you come here to say that? I thought you'd at least say you'll cut ties with your mother and ask me to come back home. I will never return to that house. Then my father-in-law, who had been silent, spoke up. Michael, fill in the divorce papers. Our family is over. When I return, I'll divorce your mother too. What? My mother-in-law turned in shock at his unexpected words. I've thought about it several times before, but I always ended up thinking it was too late for a divorce and that I should just endure it. But now, to realize that you've done such things not just to me but also to another young woman, I've reached my limit. Divorce her and leave that house. Upon hearing this from my father-in-law, Michael reluctantly agreed to divorce. As compensation for the trouble, I received about $10,000 from my father-in-law. Initially, I refused, but when he said it would be deducted from my mother-in-law's share of the property division, I gratefully accepted. My former in-laws did indeed divorce, and although my mother-in-law tried to rely on Michael, he blamed her for everything and refused to help her, leading to a complete family breakdown. My former mother-in-law, who hadn't worked since her marriage, tried to find an easy way to work and, on someone's suggestion, ventured into cryptocurrency. Unfortunately, she ended up losing all the money she received from the divorce settlement. I'm now receiving regular child support payments from Michael and am raising our daughter with the help of my parents. It's truly a joy to see my daughter growing up healthy and happy. My name is Katherine Johnson. I was a career woman working for a certain company. My husband, Michael, quit his job to become a stay-at-home husband when we got married. I had been with my current company. The decision for me to work and for Michael to manage the household was made. Due to his interests and our family situation, Michael was always good at cooking and doing housework, even when we were dating. Since becoming a stay-at-home husband, he fully utilized these skills. After the birth of our daughter, Sophie, he became even more proactive in parenting and household duties. Of course, I would also spend time with my daughter when I was home, but I came to realize that Michael's domestic skills far surpassed mine. Both Michael's and my parents understood the circumstances of our work and Michael's personality well, and they were supportive of his decision to become a stay-at-home husband. Both our families would often visit us at home, and after Sophie's birth, they frequently checked in on us, creating a very positive home environment. Hi, honey, you're back. Mommy, you're home. I was always greeted by our daughter, Sophie, and Michael, who prepared the warm meal for us. This comforting home was my motivation to keep pushing forward. As the sole breadwinner, I was feeling pressure to work even harder. However, there was a rather troublesome person among my superiors at work. The department I was working for mainly handled administrative tasks, so there were lots of women working there. Good morning, Catherine. My colleague, Emily, would greet me as she sat down next to me. Emily and I had known each other since we joined the company, and she had just returned from maternity leave. Our company was a major player in the industry, with excellent employee benefits, creating a comfortable and fulfilling work environment. Emily was able to take maternity leave without any issues. The queen bee is still sitting at that desk, isn't she? Returning to work and getting back into the groove, Emily looked towards the back of our office and said that with a sigh. Even in the good workplaces, if there were many women, there would always be a so-called a queen bee in a leadership position. And our department was no exception. This queen bee, Barbara, whom we secretly called Ms. Gossip, was the source of my troubles. Even when Emily went on maternity leave, Ms. Gossip would loudly say things like, "Young people these days are so weak, taking maternity leave so easily." During breaks or when we had a moment to chat, she would invariably boast about her husband. Ms. Gossip's husband, an executive at a large corporation, was often the topic of her endless conversations about his greatness and achievements, even when no one asked. It was like the fox borrowing the tiger's might. Emily and other colleagues were tired of Ms. Gossip's bragging and usually just tuned out. When Ms. Gossip finally left, Emily would breathe a sigh of relief, saying, "Finally, we're free." Although I had to deal with Ms. Gossip's mood swings, the work environment was so comfortable that I tried my best not to offend her. Being one of the tenured employees, I naturally had many opportunities to assist and interact with Ms. Gossip. Ms. Gossip, due to her husband's influence, would dine at upscale restaurants near the office every day. If our lunch times coincided with one another's, she would invite me to join her. I couldn't refuse due to work relations, but then I would have to endure endless bragging about her husband. It was like torture. At first, I tolerated it because the meals served at those restaurants were so delicious. However, over the time, I grew tired of listening to her. Not only would she brag about her husband, but also talk about her personal views and values on certain things, which were becoming unbearably painful to listen to. She would tell me that a man's job was to earn money. That a man's worth was measured by how much money he would make. She would always boast about marrying her husband for money so she could live a luxurious life for the rest of her life. Just listening to what she said was utterly tiresome. Although I managed to maintain a decent relationship with Ms. Gossip, I couldn't deny that I felt stressed. In fact, I had been stressed out. The reason was probably because I disliked her constant nagging. Yet, I had to suck it up, thinking of Michael, cooking dinner and waiting for me to come home, and our daughter Sophie. As long as I didn't upset her, my work was fulfilling, and the work environment was good. But then, an incident occurred. In our department, it would get very busy at certain times of the year. Despite the fact that I was just an administrative assistant, the amount of work and the number of meetings increased. And I would often find myself bustling around not just with my tasks, but also assisting Ms. Gossip. Although she was a superior, she couldn't even do her jobs properly. She would often forget to check her emails. And she wouldn't even know how to prepare documents for the meetings. Yet she would arrogantly tell us what to do. She also had the tendency to become hysterical, especially when it was busy. When I first joined the company, all of us were often at the mercy of her unreasonable demands and mood swings, which even led some to quit their jobs. However, since I took the lead in assisting her, and with the help of Emily and other colleagues working behind the scenes, we were able to get the job done reasonably well. But that day, I felt unwell since I woke up in the morning. Though I felt so weak that I wanted to take a day off, I had some work that needed to be done, so I took some tablets and went to the office. Michael was worried and suggested I take a rest, but I assured him I was fine and went to work. By afternoon, my condition worsened significantly. I felt like the walls of darkness enveloping me, overwhelmed by a headache and fatigue, and I collapsed over my desk. Startled by my sudden collapse, Emily rushed to call an ambulance, but I told her it was okay, and asked her to call my husband instead. Emily, knowing my husband's situation, readily agreed, but unfortunately, Ms. Gossip overheard our conversation. Emily helped me to the visitor's sofa, and used my phone to call Michael. After drinking some water, I started feeling a little bit better. I felt guilty for troubling Michael, who advised me to stay home. I was thinking I shouldn't have come to work that day when Ms. Gossip approached me, timing it perfectly. She asked, "Isn't your husband supposed to be at work?" As I struggled with how to explain, she said with a smirk, "Your husband is a stay-at-home dad, isn't he, Catherine?" I had a bad feeling and tried to explain about my husband's situation, but in that moment, I could sense a change in her gaze. I knew then, that was the look of someone who wouldn't listen, no matter what I said. Once Ms. Gossip decided on something, it would be hard to get her to see things from a different perspective. I'd been on the receiving end of that look quite a few times in the past, always ending up backing down. And there it was again, that same look. Ms. Gossip said, "I understand," and nonchalantly returned to her seat. Emily, returning to where I was, complained, not a word of sympathy from her, but that wasn't what I was worried about. Soon after, Michael called me to say he had arrived to pick me up. I had a bad feeling again and asked him to wait downstairs, but Michael insisted, "You have a fever, I'll come up to your floor," and came up to where I was. Normally, I would appreciate his kindness, but at that time it only intensified my anxiety. I was hoping that nobody in our busy department would notice his arrival, but Ms. Gossip saw him walking towards our office. As soon as Michael, wearing a visitor's badge, entered the office, Ms. Gossip stood up from her seat. Seeing Michael grabbing my work bag and coat, Ms. Gossip hurled unbelievable words at him. "Are you Catherine's husband? Aren't you ashamed to be a stay-at-home dad? Making your wife work until she collapses from a fever, unbelievable." My mind was slow to process her words due to the fever. Everyone in the office, including Emily, other female employees, and a few male colleagues, was speechless. Ms. Gossip was blatantly harassing Michael, who wasn't working. She loudly criticized him, saying it was pathetic for a man to stay home and take care of the house. My bad premonition had come true. I was shaking with quiet rage. After all, the reason why I had to work so hard was partly due to Ms. Gossip's negligence in her work. She acted all high and mighty, but I was the one diligently preparing the documents and materials for meetings. Why was Michael subjected to such harassment when he was just worried and came to pick me up? I thought Ms. Gossip was incredibly rude to him. To her sarcasm, Michael replied, "I'm good at cooking and find housework easy, so being a stay-at-home dad suits me. Plus, I actually enjoy managing the household budget." He said this with a smile. In fact, Michael was great at cooking, was a good parent, and was helpful with housework and childcare. He wasn't even feeling bad about being a stay-at-home dad, and confidently stood up to Ms. Gossip. To his response, Ms. Gossip frowned unhappily and said, "Just take your wife home," throwing a parting shot before returning to her seat. Michael quickly gathered my things and supported me as I was staggering. "Michael, I'm sorry. I've put you through this unpleasant situation." I was completely exhausted from the fever and Ms. Gossip's harassment. In the elevator, feeling angry at Ms. Gossip and sorry for Michael, I almost cried. Sensing this, Michael out. Lately, I've been doing Ms. Gossip's work along with my own, which probably led to this exhaustion. I told my boss, David, about my results from the hospital and was granted a few days of paid sick leave to rest. I wondered if it was really okay to take such a long break during our busy time of the year. However, after receiving messages from Emily saying, "Don't worry, just rest," I decided to rest for a few days. I was concerned that I hadn't heard anything from Ms. Gossip. But during the unexpected week off, I thoroughly enjoyed spending quality time with Michael and our daughter Sophie. Visiting Michael's parents, going to the park with Sophie, and shopping together as a family, I completely forgot the anger I had towards Ms. Gossip. Fully enjoyed the time off. A week later, I returned to work. I was checking on the backlog of tasks when Ms. Gossip suddenly invited me to dinner over the weekend. Apparently, her husband had secured a reservation at a newly opened popular upscale restaurant. She planned to take a few colleagues along, saying it was also to celebrate my recovery. "You should bring your husband along," Ms. Gossip suggested. Remembering how she treated Michael, I casually declined the suggestion. Ms. Gossip looked disappointed, like a little child who lost a toy, and reluctantly said, "All right then." At that moment, the anger I had forgotten started to resurface. She said she would let me know the name and the location of the restaurant on the day, and then return to her seat. Talking about it with Emily, we both agreed that Ms. Gossip probably wanted to surprise us and show us how amazing she was. When I told Michael about it at home, he didn't show any displeasure and encouraged me to go. I had mixed feelings. I was feeling happy that he didn't seem to be annoyed, but at the same time, I was disappointed that he wouldn't stop me from going. That week was the end of our busy season, and I spent every day clearing the piled-up work and assisting Ms. Gossip. Then, the weekend arrived, and it was the day we were going for dinner together. Without knowing the restaurant's name, all of us including Emily and myself were led by a triumphant Ms. Gossip out of the office. When we arrived at the restaurant, Emily and I were struck with disbelief. The other colleagues seemed surprised too, but for different reasons. Isn't it amazing? It's such a popular restaurant you won't be able to get a reservation easily. But my husband managed to get one. "Let's go inside," Ms. Gossip boasted, satisfied to see what she thought was my astonishment, and headed into the restaurant. The bewildered colleagues followed Ms. Gossip, and Emily and I, snapping out of our shock, followed last. The atmosphere of the restaurant was wonderful, and the service by the waiters was impeccable. Ms. Gossip had reserved a private room for us, and the course meals seemed pre-selected, as dishes were served the moment we sat down. Initially nervous, my colleagues began to relax, thoroughly enjoying the exquisite dinner. The food was delicious, and the service was excellent. But I was restless. Emily seemed to feel the same, occasionally glancing my way, but I deliberately said nothing. As the course meal was winding down, with only dessert and drinks left to be served. The conversation up to that point had been dominated by Ms. Gossip bragging about her husband. She kept saying how her husband managed to reserve such a fabulous restaurant. Every now and then, she demeaned my husband for being a stay-at-home dad. Her comments were harsh and cruel. Talking about husbands who reluctantly do housework, dependent on their wives. Suggesting that such men, being lazy and reliant on women, were probably cheating on their wives. She made such baseless accusations and snickered at me. Seeing her smug face, I felt anger boiling up inside me. Emily seemed to have reached her limit too, and we were about to leave early to avoid causing a scene when something unexpected happened. "Thank you very much for visiting our restaurant today," said the owner, Richard, in a suit appearing from the back of the restaurant. Ms. Gossip was dumbfounded when Richard came into the private room and asked, "Did our chef cause any inconvenience?" This left my colleagues, except Emily and me, in utter astonishment. Emily and I were surprised by Richard's appearance for a different reason. The reason I was antsy all evening was that I knew this place very well. In fact, I had been invited here before it even opened. The owner, Richard, who appeared from the back, was Michael's older brother. Emily, whose maiden name was Parker, now shared my surname, Johnson. Emily is Richard's wife and, consequently, the sister-in-law of Michael. Who was the head chef of this upscale restaurant? Michael used to work as a chef at a very famous French restaurant. He and his brother decided to venture into the restaurant business, which was their long-held dream, and opened that restaurant with the money they had accumulated over the years. With Richard in charge of management and Michael responsible for cooking. I met Michael through Emily, who was going out with Richard at the time, and we eventually got married. I also had a positive family relationship with Emily, and when she gave birth, I helped her. Drawing on my own experiences from the time Sophie was born. Michael and Richard had already saved enough money to open a restaurant even before we married. But Michael wanted to refine his cooking techniques to his satisfaction. So, after our marriage, he left the French restaurant, where he was training, to become a full-time stay-at-home dad, focusing on perfecting his culinary skills. Finally, he was satisfied with his recipes, and the brothers opened the restaurant. Opening event, so we knew about this place very well. After opening, the restaurant quickly became famous, featured in magazines and TV shows, and turned into a well-sought-after restaurant with hard-to-get reservations. The reason why Richard, the owner and Emily's husband, came to our private room was simple. Ms. Gossip's loud voice had carried all the way to the owner's room, and Richard heard Michael's name was mentioned in the conversation. Richard didn't even know we were at the restaurant and seemed a bit surprised to see us when he entered the room. But his expression also held a quiet anger. Like the kind-hearted Michael, his brother was also a gentle person. However, he always said, "I hate it most when someone belittles my little brother." So, he must have been quite upset by Ms. Gossip's insulting remarks. "Forgive me, but the Michael you call a henpecked husband is the head chef of this restaurant and a treasure to us. He is not the person you describe. He is honest and takes pride in his work as a chef. The dishes you just enjoyed were developed by him over the years. Please understand his personality and the dedication and effort he puts into his work." We had to restrain our emotions, wanting to cheer, "Yes. Great." Perhaps sensing our feelings, Richard continued to speak highly of Michael as a chef and as a person. Glancing at a completely knocked-out Ms. Gossip, Richard looked around at all of us at the table. "Sorry for the disturbance. As an apology, please enjoy an additional dessert on the house," he said before leaving the room. As he exited, Richard caught our eyes and gave a slight smile before leaving. It felt like a complete victory. All of us, including Ms. Gossip with a red face, went silent after witnessing everything. Unable to bear the situation, Ms. Gossip quickly paid the bill and left the restaurant. The dessert served after she left was a popular shortcake, which Emily and I enjoyed very much. It was delicious. A few days later. With Michael working full-time as the head chef, I quit my job to become a full-time homemaker. I received words of gratitude and appreciation from my colleagues, and I still keep in touch with them, meeting for coffee in my free time. From what I hear from Emily, who took over my position at the company, Ms. Gossip's husband found out about that day's events. Moreover, he discovered she had been misusing his earnings, leading to him losing patience and divorcing her. Now, she claims she's married to her job, but without me as her assistant, her reputation at the company has plummeted. Well, it's a case of reaping what she sowed. I'm happy with my life, spending quality time with my beloved child. Once I find more time between parenting and housework, I plan to help out at Michael's restaurant.